Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about, emerging data that we have and the science that is looking at size versus strength and muscle growth. And what I want to be clear, there's a lot of bad exercise science, right? There's a lot of bad exercise science, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some decent measurements being taken, particularly when they start looking at measuring stuff in muscles, right? Comparing strength, measuring muscles in the lab, measuring force production, DEXA scans, MRIs on muscles. There can be some interesting trends found. And what's becoming interesting as technology gets better, we're seeing a growing trend. There's a growing trend, a body of evidence suggesting very much that at least at the tendon level, right? Not what you can do with coordination when you learn to coordinate multiple muscles together. Like, again, it's not tendon level. That bench press is not a tendon level. I have multiple muscles involved, levers involved, right? Our individual leverages matter. That's why ranges of motion, joint angles, and all that stuff get real important on big exercises. But the ability of a muscle itself to be strong, the data that they're finding in the lab now really seem to suggest that growth and changes in the contractile proteins, what we think of as real hypertrophy, right? The really permanent hard muscle growth, right? So think of it that way, not just soft squish and cytoplasm, which is a little different. That would be more sarcoplasmic growth, or glycogen and water storage that can be trained. Those can be trained, right? Those things don't seem to contribute. That can be some minor disparity in the size versus strength of a muscle. Okay, but what we are seeing on the other is that contractile tissue growth, what you would think of as actual real hypertrophy, muscle growth, seems to be almost entirely and possibly the sole contributor of any changes in strength, good or bad, at the ability of the muscle to produce force down at the tendon and into the joint level. Okay. Keep in mind, I'm talking about, again, that would be your triceps ability to bend the elbow, right? Doesn't mean the entirety of your ability to bench press. That there's a coordination element to that, right? You've got to have some coordination between the muscles to do that. But when it's just a muscle contracting, when they lock it into a plane where it's a single joint movement where they can lock you in and test the force, oh yeah, that strength is hypertrophy. And depending upon the data and how modern it is, it could be as low as 90%, and it could be as much as 100% of the force production. Which, if that's the case, and that really tells us the reality, there's very little difference between size and strength, at least in terms of the muscle fiber itself. Okay? The muscle fiber. Now, leverages matter. How far you move a weight matters, of course. The moment arms matter. Now, you can't see it as much on a bench press. You can because you can see the range of motion. I have a really long bench, and I'm also benching flyback. I have long arms. A longer arm, you can't curl as much weight. Okay? Even if you take two guys with the exact same size bicep, literally the same, like if you were to transplant their biceps onto each other magically and have them work. Or you could just shorten the forearm, right? Guy with a 1 inch longer forearm or 1 inch shorter forearm, there will be a difference between how much they can concentration curl. Does that make sense? With the same bicep. And it's because it's a longer lever, common sense, okay? But was the strength of the tendon different? No, because it takes more force down at the tendon and joint to work against that longer or shorter lever, right? That's a factor. Your ability to coordinate it matters. A lot of that coordination, though, the best coordination comes from actually lifting really heavy weights. Surprisingly enough, if you want to get good at lifting really heavy weights, you should probably lift really heavy weights. I want to note that in most of these clips, these are not heavy. These are like a 5x5, right? These aren't even true all-out 5-rep maxes, because this is weights I can do for 5 sets of 5. That's not that heavy. That's more of a moderately heavy weight, right? It's actually really a size protocol. It's a good way to gain muscle, particularly on big exercises. That still falls under bodybuilding. How do you maximize strength, though? Maxes doing weights that are heavier than 90%. Right? That's how you get strong. But strong in the sense of using the muscle that you already have maximally, teaching yourself to use it. And we know that that can be worth a little bit. And it's not an enormous difference, by the way. Meaning you're not going to take someone who has a given amount of muscle and let's say they can bench 300 without practicing any heavy work. They're not going to bench 400 just because they practice heavy work. But they might bench 330 with enough maxing if their muscle mass stays the same. Okay, so context there. Context. Okay, because the only other factors we can change outside of that technique, and that technique is motor unit learning. Okay, that's a learned skill. Lifting heavy is a learned skill, and we know that that transfers too, by the way. Lifts can transfer to other lifts. Some people are not aware of that because you're learning to coordinate big muscles together with really, really heavy loads. All right, that actually can transfer from one lift to another in some cases, depending on how different they are. So that's a skill, but it's a skill in the sense of, just like throwing a baseball is a skill, right? Throwing a punch is a skill. Throwing a kick is a skill, although I would say those ladders are probably a higher skill than most lifts are. Let's be fair. They have a steeper learning curve, require more practice. But that's how you then maximize strength. But all the potential comes from the muscle growth, right? Because that's what gives you the ability to make the actual force at the tendon. The rest is just learning to use it and leverage it and coordinate it. So there's not as much difference between these as people think. And I'm not saying that the goals to train for each should be identical, because that's not true. That absolutely isn't true. But there's an enormous degree of overlap. Once you remove substances from the equation, or you equalize them, right? The amount of overlap between these two is enormous. It's enormous. Because generally speaking, anything that makes the muscle fiber grow is going to make you stronger. Anything that makes you stronger through any process other than the coordination end is obviously going to make the muscle fiber grow. Okay? And even a lot of these methods that do cause some pump and other stuff, and there may be other factors involved, they still are going to potentially cause some muscle fiber growth. Okay? There's going to be some. But the idea here is that people get way too dogmatic in the separations between these two when there isn't nearly as much as people think that there is. And it's for reasons that they're not grasping. The differences are not the differences that people think that they are. Right? All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.